prior to legalization, where most of us were to acquire our products. And those people were also most likely to be the ones incarcerated for cannabis offenses. As legalization became a reality, it became clear that as licensing became available or the application process became available, it was clear that to stay successful in this world, they had to move to the legal side.
Welcome to How to Flourish in Cannabis. I'm your host, Brian Weber. Our topic today, success in the New York and New Jersey markets from a cannabis PR professional. How to Flourish in Cannabis is an educational-focused show with experienced leaders in regulated cannabis. Our guests have a wide range of industry experience in law, insurance, real estate, and today, cannabis PR. No pitches here. This is designed to be a masterclass in regulated cannabis. How to Flourish in Cannabis is our effort to educate and elevate. Stu, I have known for at least a few years right now, and I'm so happy to have you on the show today. You have given me a lot of personal guidance and a lot of industry knowledge from running into you at almost every networking event here in New York City. I've known you for a long time, but our audience may not. I wanted to give you a little bit of a moment to give a little background on some of the PR work that you've done and how you entered the cannabis space and some of the clients that you're working for right now here.
Sure. Well, it's great to be here today, Brian. Thanks for having me. So I've been in the cannabis space for about 12 years now, well before there was really a cannabis space. Before I got here, I spent most of my career in the entertainment and media business, working in the film industry for 25 years, working in publishing at companies like Rolling Stone, Us Weekly, Playboy, National Enquirer, and other publications like that. I went to premiere television Showtime, whereas coincidentally, one of the shows I helped launch was Weeds. Came to the space because I saw the opportunity that this industry was going to have, similar to when I tried to get into the .com world in the late 1990s. And I worked for two sites that had great ideas, but just couldn't get it together financing-wise. Cannabis is kind of similar to that in that it's the Wild Wild West, which attracts me because I love to break and make rules. And here we are the ones doing it. So that's the beauty of being a pioneer in the space early on and finding people of like mind who saw what this was going to be, knew that we had to be patient and let society take its way, and which we've been. But once cannabis was legalized here and also in New Jersey, opportunities started to happen. The need for my role started to happen, largely due to what we would call being handcuffed because we're still federally illegal. So as a result, you can't use regular advertising and marketing techniques, which is wonderful for a PR person, because it makes us incredibly valuable and a necessary part of doing business. And since I don't expect us to get legal anytime soon on a federal level, this will only continue to help my industry get its role in this market and really have an impact on how we move forward.
Yeah, and helping those brands really tell those stories and also educating the public, which is, you see things from a very large macro level, PR people really do, and how to navigate that story. And that's why I wanted to have you on today. And, I know here in New York, you've worked with Happy Munkey and Travel Agency and a number of other really amazing brands. And I wanted to share some of that insight that you have gained over the years and working through them.
I would say to that, Brian, one of the stories people would probably most likely to hear would be about Happy Munkey and its transition from legacy to legal. And I can explain what legacy and legal. Legacy is what we used to call the black market, where prior to legalization, where most of us were to acquire our products, and those people were also most likely to be the ones incarcerated for cannabis offenses. As legalization became a reality, it became clear that New York State and New Jersey, to that degree, and a lot of other states, are looking to embrace the community that did all the heavy lifting for the last 80 to 100 years and really established what the industry is, and everything from cultivation through production through distribution. Their channels were a little different than we have now for all of that.
There's a supply chain for whether it's legal or illegal. There is a supply chain.
Correct. But these are people who were uniquely skilled in this field, and who probably didn't know that they were uniquely skilled. But as licensing became available, or the application process became available, it was clear that to stay successful in this world, they had to move to the legal side. And what the beauty of that is it kind of overall, like my long-term mission here is to eradicate the stigma and give people opportunities in a new industry. That's what it really became for them. And as people may not be aware what the card program is here in New York, which gives preference to those who were not wrongly incarcerated, but wrongly incarcerated for minor offenses. And as a result, it was on their, they were felons. It was on their record. They couldn't get access to public housing. They couldn't get vote. There's a lot of things they weren't allowed to do. This is a way to rectify those mistakes. And you have to take your hat off to OCM, which is the government agency in New York State that oversees the cannabis program, in coming up with this solution, prioritizing them. Clearly, there was a bunch of lawsuits that, not surprisingly, were done by people who resented rather the access these people were getting, and did slow down the rollout of the program, which unfortunately resulted in what we see now throughout New York City, and probably suburban and rural areas are illegal stores where the state doesn't get a penny in tax revenue, doesn't really create any new jobs, and doesn't really move the industry forward. So the Happy Munkey kind of, I would say, personifies this move from legacy to legal. Prior to the pandemic, they ran a very successful speakeasy in the traditional form of a speakeasy, that during prohibition of alcohol, but this is prohibition of cannabis, where you had to be invited, you had to know how to get in. It was an incredibly discreet location in Times Square area, but you would never know it was there. Initially, they did one night. One of the owners had gone to Amsterdam and saw what the cannabis lifestyle was there in a social setting, and said, we should be doing this in New York. So they were able to get access to a recording studio that had a lot of square footage space, and had a party. Went through the roof. They said, maybe we're onto something here. But it's creating a safe haven for people to come consume what was then an illegal product, and also obtain products that were obtained illegally for them to consume at that location. But what it did, it really shows the unanimity of cannabis consumers, who they are. It's not everybody, but there's certainly a cross section of America who do consume. And at their place, you were felt important. You were greeted at the door by the owner, who's a very charismatic man. It was a combination of rappers, athletes, any basketball. I saw more Super Bowl rings in that place, because clearly football players consumed, but also regular people. It was used as a congregating point for the industry, a birth in a way of it, because many of the people who I met there are now in leadership positions in the cannabis space. So it was lawyers, it was politicians, it was a lot of different people that Forbes called them the Studio 54 of cannabis in New York. And that was pretty cool. But then the pandemic happened. Nobody was getting together in consumption lounges.
Especially not sharing joints and sharing bowls and whatever else, not passing blunts around.
So recognizing that revenue was over, they pivoted to a lifestyle brand with merchandising and a media company with a podcast and magazine and digital publications. And once legalization came into effect on April 1st, 2020, they had what was the first legal pot party in New York, We had it at a steakhouse directly opposite the New York Stock Exchange. And there was a real logic behind that. And this is part of something we'll address a little later about using the media to educate people. But optically, it showed what this was about. This was about the money. And that eventually, and taking away the curtain, actually, and allowing people to see what today's cannabis consumer looks like, who they are. We're not Cheech and Chong. We're not hippies with long hair who haven't bathed forever. We're not, we're professionals.
The stoner dudes sitting on grandma's or mom's couch in the basement.
Right. I mean, I'm sure there still exists some people like that, but more often than not, we're all successful professionals in different areas where cannabis is a bond that brings us all together. So we had a heavy media presence there because they were intrigued by the whole concept and really seeing what goes on. We had 500 people over the course of the night and identified what was essentially a new direction for Happy Munkey to go into, from the illegal speakeasy to legal events that had allowed consumption. Because in New York State, unlike any other state in the country, you can consume cannabis anywhere people can consume tobacco. So legally compliant events that went on to win awards.
And I think New York smells a lot nicer for that too. I know not everyone's going to agree with me on that one, but
well, I don't think there's any difference, honestly. No. People have been smoking on the streets in New York forever. Yeah. I have personally.
Same.
And in some pretty, iconic locations, just because it was cool to do it. And I remember when April 1st happened, I went to one of those spots, which was right outside the skating rink at Rockefeller Center, and lit up a joint. And I was like, wow, I'm not going to get busted today. But, people are a little intolerant of the smell. And you say, look, it's been going on forever. As I said earlier, that's the least you should be complaining about. By transitioning to legal, as Happy Munkey has done, in addition to the events, they are going to actually be retailers as of this summer, opening the first legal dispensary in the Inwood section of Washington Heights, which is north of 125th, between 125th and George Washington Bridge. And they will be the only legal store. The importance of, and this is why Vlad Batista, who is the CEO of Happy Munkey, made this decision. They could have gone downtown like everybody else, but they are from that neighborhood. They are of that neighborhood. And by coming back to that neighborhood to open this store, which will feature not only cannabis products and all that, but a heavy dose of education. Because within the Black and Latino community, as I mentioned earlier, who were the ones most impacted by the failed war on drugs, it destroyed a lot of families, created a lot of ill will towards this industry as being disruptive rather than an opportunity for generational wealth, which it is now. So by them going back to that area from a PR person perspective, more than anything, is manna from heaven, because it just gives such credibility and, more importantly, shows people that there is a new path to success in this world.
Yeah, no, and like to be a beacon there. And like I've been to many of those events, obviously running into you there a number of times. And it was a big lift and an effort from them and you actually to do that. Like, having this grand vision, having this energy, having a media team that's in there, putting together, pausing legacy operations, putting together a retail storefront. Anybody who's followed anything in New York knows how insanely hard it is to do that. What were some of the guiding, beyond just the mission of coming back to their neighborhood and transitioning to what is going to be a new market and allowing to help form and write some of those rules, for New York cannabis and what that is going to be for, both business wise and also community wise. What were some of the really salient, actionable things that they did strategically early on to focus on that? What was beyond that?
Well, because luckily enough, I was there at that time. I've been with them for 6 years. It was a decision to be compliant, to no longer do some things like I'm not telling you any secrets at a school here. They were known for, besides the Speakeasy, they had a pretty well known delivery service that had to stop the minute they decided to apply for a license. Cleaning up their act, playing by the rules, hiring attorneys who were specialized in this area, because you have to remember legacy people as a whole did not have a full fledged education. They did not necessarily graduate high school or go to college. They learned what they did by living on the street, which is all well and good in that environment. However, in the legal environment, you need to employ professionals who have that business background that you may have instinctively, but you don't know how to apply it in a strategic way. And so they were very lucky that they were able to link up with a group of professionals who are super smart, who understand not only the legal issues involved with cannabis, but what's involved and how to make a business work. Everything from meetings that have an agenda to flowchart, to spreadsheets, to holding people accountable for things that they're supposed to do, and rallying all around that to professionalize who they are and how they operate. So if you consider that there were 463 card licenses issued by New York State, and currently, I think statewide in mid hundreds, I think we're at, all of whom are card licensees. Unfortunately, there's obstacles for the rest of the others to come to market, which is everything from raising capital to finding a location that doesn't cost a fortune, finding access to money and banking for yourself where you're not paying a stupid surcharge, because we are still federally illegal. So most banks, whether it's Citibank or Chase or you name it, they're reluctant to invest in what is still a federally illegal business because they could lose the FDIC insurance and would jeopardize a lot of things for them. So for this community, specifically the card applicants, I would project, unfortunately, that 3/4 of them will never see the light of day, even though they've sacrificed family funds, friends funds, whatever they had to put together, and still pay the professionals who were working with them to get to the application stage, to get through all the different processes. And those licenses, unfortunately, will be up for grabs and probably be scooped up for 20 cents on a dollar by the big companies that the card program was designed to keep out until these people are able to get their feet wet.
I've heard every horror story in this, I'm sure you've heard a lot more of people trying to get there, but just didn't have enough runway. But that is business. That is the state of business. You got to be able to form a team and raise money. And
I mean, it's not just a New York situation. There's a lot of states going through the same process. But in New Jersey, which preceded New York going into legalization with a medical program at first, and then making it into adult use, there were other issues involved here. There was lawsuits that slowed down the awarding of licenses for 3 years. So you have people who have invested all this money or found investors sitting on it, spending money over the course of these 3 years over a lawsuit that was really done as a nuisance lawsuit. And there's been a bunch of those in New York, as we know. Last summer, there was one that almost shut the entire program down. So these are why the legacy market is a little reluctant to transition into it, because look at all this money I'm going to spend to get there. And what are the odds that I can even open my doors? But those that do will reap those rewards. The other ones, unfortunately, won't.
Yeah. What has been, and I really want to the crux of you being on, and I appreciate kind of the state of the industry, and I appreciate the story of, with Happy Munkey as a prime example here and then launching retail. But for you as a PR professional, if you're a candidate here in New York, especially New Jersey as well, What are some of the things that you would leverage or give some advice, some actionable items to them that you can start from day one right now in how to get your brand out there, how to use the media to your advantage, as you are so skilled with this?
Well, one of the things you have to do is have a strategy, and you just can't wing it. This is a very challenging area. You're fighting stigmas that go back many, many generations. So the first thing is educating the public that cannabis is not a gateway drug to addiction. It's a gateway drug out of addiction. That it creates a legal way for people who've been living this life illegally for so many years that benefits the state, that benefits the communities that these stores are in, because by law, 4% of those taxes that they generate have to come back to the community. So that means improved schools, more police officers, more services that these neighborhoods have historically not received. So using the media as a mechanism to explain that to people is key. And we're not talking the cannabis media. People say, well, High Times and all that stuff. Well, we know High Times is not what it used to be. And it's also going through some serious problems. Cannabis media as a whole is largely digital, but it's preaching to the converted. My goal and also the challenge is to preach to the unconverted and convert them to advocates rather than see us as unproductive stoners. See cannabis as a solution to a better lifestyle, to demonstrate how no one's ever died of an overdose of cannabis. Rather than use opiates, which we know after day 3 create addicts, to treat pain, to treat depression, anxiety, PTSD, the list goes on. Cannabis is a healthier way of doing that. And the fact that these are the kind of stories that help change people's minds is why I highlight them. Nobody really cares that I smoked a 40% pre-roll and got really high.
Nobody cares.
No.
I care, Stu, but it's an anecdotal story. How would you recommend that these budding, I'll use the cannabis pun and apologize for it immediately, retail shops connect with different levels of media throughout the organization? There's like those local levels that you're going to have, like the Patch, and you're going to have the local Channel 11 news and your local network or your local neighborhood newspaper that comes out from there. And it goes up from there. Like, we're not talking about getting a spotlight on CBS Sunday morning.
Although that would be great. Listen, we did get a spotlight on CBS Saturday mornings on Thanksgiving weekend, which was, you talk about stories that help change the perception. Let me use that as an example. So it was a cannabis version of Farm to Table, where the crew went to the farm. In this case, it was Hudson Farms, who are women-owned business, well known within the space, very passionate about what they do. So they spent time seeing a harvest and then seeing what goes on post-harvest, everything from curing room to the trim room to the pre-roll stations to the processing that manufactures concentrates. All those things were shown on camera, and interviewed the farmers and the workers to see what they were doing and how they went about it. And then next went to a lab, which in cannabis is crucial to everything because it has to be tested by the standards that are set by the state. So the reporter actually went over and showed what each line meant and how crucial the testing is to consumer safety, that you are going to get products that have been run through a series of tests to make sure they're safe for you to use. And then finally, from there to retail, where they came to the travel agency store in Union Square. So that was a 7-minute segment on a very highly watched program, as mainstream as you can get, and really helps to move. So you say, what does the store do? They need to find a story that makes them a little unique. Obviously, the best thing for them to do is hire somebody like me to do that for them, because they're not going to be skilled and have the contacts. But the storytelling that you do around that, especially as we're talking minorities here, 100% as owners right now, who are making that transition. What does it look like? How hard is it? What was their backgrounds before they came here? And how are they planning to move forward? How is their store going to be different than the other stores? New York has placed some serious restrictions on sales, promotions, and discounts. So from a retailing perspective, which is basically retail 101, how do you circumvent that? How do you draw traffic to the stores? Media is certainly an important part of it. With the social equity component here too, a lot of these owners are minorities and women. And for an industry to embrace these audiences as people to be workers or owners is in itself a story to tell. So it's knowing what you want. And by the time they get to that point, Brian, they've gone through so many different processes, from the applications through acceptance to the dealing with the tenants, the landlords, and all that kinds of stuff, that they all have a kind of idea of what their story is. Every card licensee has an incredible story to tell.
And this is a know your why moment. Why are we here? Why are we serving this? That's really what the crux of what you're saying here is know your why. The story that you told about it showed the whole supply chain. It showed the safety that is a benefit of regulated cannabis versus non-regulated cannabis, especially here in New York, where there's stores everywhere. And it was able to highlight what regulated cannabis is trying to bring to New York versus just calling your guy or texting your guy or whatever that is. For those other smaller brands that might not have the budget for Stu yet and your expert talents is, what would you recommend for them in sharing their, obviously the first part is know your why. And a lot of people might do that, but it might not be written down into a plan, and then having like a media plan of like going to market.
So I would say the media plan is actually the last step of the process for them. It starts with being a member of the community. And since the stigma still exists, you do need to reach out to the community. New York has community boards, which are very important because they oversee, except for the cannabis industry, every business that exists in that community. It's almost like a mini chamber of commerce, but with a little more leverage or gravitas. Like if I wanted to open a liquor store or an ice cream store or a clothing store, they actually have the thumbs up, thumbs down authority on that. The only area that they don't is with cannabis because we're issued by the state. But you still want to work the neighborhood. You want all the other merchants to be your friends, your supporters. Sit there, answer their questions. Explain to them that their community is actually going to be safer by having a legal store in it because of the compliance regulations regarding how many cameras do you have to put in the store and outside the store, and that people in a legal store cannot smoke. They can't open their packages. You can't smoke outside the store or on property, and that helps make it a safer place. Whereas where the illegal stores are, it's the opposite. There's the neon lights and all the bells and whistles that you can't do. So for people, actually, that's a way to understand or recognize where a legal store is versus an illegal store. If they got neon lights and they're saying what kind of weed they're selling, it's illegal. New York State has a logo that they award to the licensed stores, which does need a public education campaign so that the public knows about it. OCM has lots of other issues to address before they get to that. I offer to do it for free. So that is step one, is becoming an active member of the community. And that costs you no money whatsoever. Since we're not, cannabis stores are not allowed to give discounts, you can work out partnerships, however, with the other merchants in the area to encourage people to shop legal. So if I come with a receipt from the travel agency and I go to a restaurant in the Union Square or now on Fifth Avenue in the Rockefeller Center area, ultimately I'll get 10% off or 20% off, which is a way to encourage business within the community. So each merchant supports each other. And that's where you have to see and focus on in the beginning. So that's job one. Job two is becoming not just a participant, but a leader, and using whatever mechanisms each neighborhood has. I don't know. New York is a very diverse town, as we know. You can't do the Boy Scouts and you can't do Little League, but you can do adult softball. You can do adult soccer. All these things that do have sponsors and and those sponsorships are also, that's a very minimal expenditure. But what you're doing is supporting your community and the residents, because they can't play in a league unless they're sponsors. And in turn, you would hope that they would shop at your store if they decide to consume cannabis and cannabis products. Then you get to the point where you worry about the media and what story you're going to tell. But that is as you get closer to your opening, whether it's a soft opening or a grand opening, it's probably the last component in the mix. So when you ask how can people do things when they don't have a budget, I would follow some of these suggestions that I just laid out, because they're practices that work. I've done it many times and it's very effective. And it, most importantly, diffuses the stereotypes they may have of this company coming into their market.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, we still have stereotypes. There's still people we have to win over here. I know we sometimes can be in the echo chamber of this industry, but those are some good advice right there, Stu. Thank you for that. So, Stu, one of the last things I want to talk to you about is, like, this industry has been under a lot of change, especially here in New York. There's been a lot of turmoil, but we're starting to see these shops opening up. And then there's also new markets coming online. Maryland, Ohio, Minnesota is going to be hopefully coming out soon. Probably not so much for the government of New Hampshire if they decide to take the PR advice or not. But we'll see how that goes. There's one question I see a lot, and customers either call in the Flourish, or I'm sure people that you meet with as well. Why should people enter this industry? What is a litmus test that you see from people being either successful or burning out?
Well, let's talk about why you should enter this industry. In my mind, it's a unique opportunity to get in while it's still a ground floor based business. Any company that has thrived as industries grow have been in from the beginning. Price of entry, although it is rather stiff, is less now than it will be in 5 years. So that's one reason. More importantly, as corporate America starts aging people out, this is a place where you can take what you've been good at your whole career and bring it to the table. There's no ageism here, and that's one of the beauties of the cannabis space. They actually appreciate experience. And, the smart person knows what they don't know more than that they do. And when you know what you don't know and you provide opportunities for people who do, everyone benefits. And we're seeing, even though, today there was a report of new jobs exceeding expectations, it's not and it's not demographically in my demographic. It's a lot younger. So if you were an accountant, a lawyer, a public relations professional, marketing type, whatever it was that you did in the real world, you can do here. In fact, we need those kind of professionals. So if I'm looking to expand my business, if I'm a carpenter or an electrician, plumber, and I've been focused on residential, well, what do you think goes on at the grow facilities? What do you think goes on at the stores? Especially with craftspeople, electricians, engineers, those jobs are more crucial in the food chain than anything. And you can have to obviously adapt somewhat to what you do here, but the innate knowledge that you bring to the industry is amazing. So when all the people who I say, I got laid off, and we know layoffs are on the rise, come here, come to the cannabis world. We need you. It will help mainstream professionalize. And look at the colleges that are now offering cannabis curriculums for degrees. It used to be these mail-in courses. I got certified for sitting through a webinar. Wonderful. Now you can get a master's degree, which means we're professionalizing the industry. So as it does grow and mature, it's just not, let's put on a show. It's let's take trained professionals to put that show on with. So that's another reason I would look to come into this space, is to extend my professional career rather, and still do things that are interesting in a challenging world in a new space. To me, that's a very attractive proposition.
Have skills, have passion, have interest. That's have patience and perseverance is also important for this industry. I'll just add those last
patience
ones.
for sure, because listen, as I said, I've been doing this for 12 years, and seeing the evolution into a real industry, and as it creates the jobs that people always said it would, and with a diverse group of people handling those positions, it makes it every day worth working up for. Excited to go in. I mean, I'm not going into the office. This is my office, more or less, using visual meetings. But it really, I think, rather than I don't know if when you see some of these stories about retirees, I'm not a retiree, but, they become greeters at Walmart or whatever. Come over here. We need greeters. And you'd be surprised demographically, who consumes more cannabis at these stores? It's seniors. New York has no discounts, but most other states do senior discounts. And I've gone to senior centers in communities where I'm about to open a store, and it's such a positive experience because they get it. They may have not consumed, even though they grew up in the 60s or 50s, but they also don't want to be held hostage to the medications that they are taking for conditions. So I think there's something in, to really give you the short answer, Brian, there's something in there for everybody. And that's why you should come to this business.
I like it. I like a little PR point at the end for the industry as well. I think it is a challenging industry, but like you like to do things because they are hard, and the opportunities here are immense, and it has only gotten better over the years as this industry grows and federal regulation changes and more states adopt medical and adult use cannabis as well. So here to that message on the end. Stu, I appreciate you sharing your words of wisdom for the little background of New York State, how you've been helping some legacy operators transition here, and also some just knowledge about the industry and maybe how to help some operators use the media to their advantage, either at a very micro local level and then growing up to, and someday we'll get that Sunday morning on CBS.
But don't discount the hyper local, because the community news, that's what they read. They may read the Times, but they'll find more credibility in the story in their community local paper than they will in the Times.
And that could be free to get right there. So there's your solid tip of the day. For more solid tips and a lot more educational professional advice, Stu, how can people find you, connect with you, follow you in your work at Bridge Strategic?
Well, the first is LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn page is very prolific. You can see everything I've done. I also have a website, bridgestrategic.com. You can get me email, stu@bridgestrategic.com. I'm on every social platform you can think of, so reach out. It's always usually at Stu Zakim, which is I use on every platform except for LinkedIn. I'm happy to help, because as I think I started off saying, Brian, my real mission here is to change the perception, eradicate the stigma, and educate people as a whole. So I'm happy to do that.
You've been an asset to me in my time in this industry, and to, I know a lot of other people as well that we've met together, and you've been doing the mission on. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you sharing all the time and wisdom that you have.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.